You won't believe what happens when a speech therapist tries to help a lost child on a rainy night. It drags her straight into a deadly mafia conflict. Minji thought she was just taking a kid home, but she's just met a ruthless mob boss who knows her deepest family secret. Can she outrun Giovanni Moretti and his men, or is she about to become a pawn in a game she never signed up for? Find out now. Where are you listening from? And if you enjoyed this story, please like the video and let me know in the comments section below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and keep the conversation going. The rain hammered against the pavement, and the city streets were deserted. Minji pulled her coat tighter as she hurried home, the echo of her footsteps ringing out in the alley. She was exhausted, her long day at the speech therapy clinic weighing heavily on her shoulders. It had been one of those days, back-to-back sessions, all of them emotionally draining. She was looking forward to a quiet evening, curling up with a cup of tea and losing herself in a book. But just as she turned the corner toward her apartment building, she saw something that stopped her in her tracks. A child. A small boy, no older than 5 or 6, was standing alone in the middle of the street, his hands clutching the fabric of his jacket as if he were trying to hold onto something, anything. Minji's heart skipped a beat. The boy's eyes were wide with panic and he looked lost, completely alone. He was muttering something, but it wasn't clear what. His lips trembled and there was a distant, confused look in his eyes. Something about him felt off. She knew this feeling. She'd seen it before, disassociation, the look of someone who was overwhelmed, drowning in their own mind. Minji had dealt with children like him before, autistic children who struggled to communicate, who found themselves lost in the noise of the world. Her training had taught her how to help them, how to be the anchor in a storm. She knelt down to his level, her voice soft and gentle. "Hey there, sweetie, you look like you need help," she said. "What's your name? Where's your mom?" The boy looked at her, eyes flickering, then shook his head. His hands twisted tighter around the jacket, his breath quickening. Minji could feel his panic building and could see the walls coming up around him. It was going to take more than just words. She had to ground him, help him find his center. Without thinking, Minji switched to Korean, the language of her childhood. Her words were slow, rhythmic, almost like a song. The soft cadence of Korean had a soothing effect. She knew it would. She had used it before with children who couldn't settle in the chaos of their own thoughts. "Ko gwenchana enos, ko natang enos ko hum enos ko isa enos," she whispered. "Ko utinan enos ko yucky enos ko isa enos, ko nunan enos ko undanha enos." The boy's body seemed to relax just slightly, but enough to break the tension. He took a slow, shaky breath, and Minji could see the storm in his eyes begin to quiet. The words worked. She smiled, a small, encouraging gesture. "That's it, you're safe now." But as she spoke, a car pulled up in front of her, the headlights cutting through the rain. The door opened, and a tall, well-dressed man stepped out. Minji didn't recognize him, but the way he moved, calm, deliberate, suggested that he wasn't here by chance. The man's eyes locked onto her and the child, and something flickered across his face. Curiosity, maybe recognition, and then something darker, more dangerous. He approached them slowly, his gaze never leaving the boy. Minji stood, instinctively shielding the child behind her, her body tense. There was something off about this man, something that sent a chill down her spine. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her voice steady but guarded. The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. His expression was cold, calculating. "Everything is fine," he said, but his eyes stayed locked on the child. "I'm just curious about your little friend here." Minji's heart beat faster. She had dealt with her share of strange encounters in the city, but this one felt different. There was something predatory about this man, something she couldn't shake off. "I'm not sure who you are, but this child is lost. I'm trying to help him. I don't need any trouble." The man chuckled softly, and Minji didn't like the sound of it. He took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. "I think you're being too modest. You're much more than just a helpful stranger, aren't you?" Before Minji could respond, the man's eyes flickered again, this time with something sharp, recognition, realization. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Find out everything about her," he ordered softly into the device. His tone was businesslike, as though he were discussing a trivial matter, but the weight of his words hit Minji like a punch to the gut. "Who are you?" Minji demanded, stepping in front of the boy. "What do you want with him?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he gave a small, dismissive wave, as if she wasn't worth the trouble. "I'm not interested in you, but your little friend here, he's more important than you think." Minji's blood ran cold. She could see the dangerous gleam in his eyes now, the cold calculation behind them. This wasn't just some random encounter. This man had a purpose, and that purpose involved the child. Before she could respond, the man turned and walked back to the car, his footsteps echoing in the rain-soaked street. The engine started, and the car disappeared into the night, leaving Minji standing there, heart pounding, her mind racing. She turned to the boy, who was still standing behind her, his eyes wide with confusion. Minji knelt down again, trying to comfort him, but the encounter had shaken her to her core. Who was that man, and what did he want with the child? Minji stood there for a moment, staring at the empty street where Giovanni's car had disappeared. The rain was falling harder now, soaking through her clothes. She could feel the cold creeping into her bones, but it was nothing compared to the chill in her gut. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Turning back to the child, she placed her hands on his shoulders, trying to calm herself as much as him. "It's okay," she murmured, though she didn't believe it. The words felt hollow now, especially after what had just happened. The boy, still trembling, didn't speak. His face remained frozen, wide-eyed and terrified, his gaze distant. Minji had worked with enough children on the autism spectrum to know that moments like these were a minefield. Too much stimulation, too many emotions, things could spiral out of control quickly. She needed to get him somewhere safe, away from whatever dark presence Giovanni had brought with him. She guided the boy toward her apartment building, glancing nervously around. The car was long gone, but she felt its shadow still looming over her. What had Giovanni meant by "find out everything about her"? She couldn't afford to let her mind wander to conclusions, at least not until she was sure. But the knot in her stomach told her the truth. Giovanni had been too interested, too focused on her, on the child. There was more at play here than some random encounter. Once inside her building, Minji helped the boy into her small apartment. The space was cozy, decorated simply with a few throw blankets and books stacked on shelves. There were no sharp edges, nothing loud. It was a quiet place, a safe place. She had created this sanctuary for her patients, for herself, but the weight of the situation was quickly sinking in. She knelt in front of the boy, trying to make eye contact. "Do you want some water?" she asked gently. "I'll get you a glass of water, okay?" The boy nodded slightly, his lips quivering as he spoke in barely audible murmurs. "I want my mom." Minji's heart ached as she heard the fear in his voice. She wanted to reassure him, tell him everything would be okay, but she wasn't sure anymore. Giovanni's words echoed in her mind. "Your little friend here. He's more important than you think." What did that mean? Who was this child? And why had Giovanni seemed so intent on finding out about her? Minji shook the thoughts away. She had to focus on the child. She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed the local authorities. She needed to report the lost child, get him the help he needed. But as she scrolled through her contacts, her finger froze. There in the list was a number she didn't recognize. The area code was unfamiliar. Before she could make a decision, the phone buzzed in her hand, the screen lighting up with an incoming call. Her pulse quickened as she stared at the number. The voice that answered was smooth, authoritative, and somehow far too calm for the situation. "Minji Lee," the voice said, his tone light but edged with something darker. "I believe we've already met. Giovanni Moretti, I assume you remember me." Her stomach dropped. She had suspected it, but hearing his voice confirmed it. Giovanni, the Mafia boss who had shown an unusual interest in her and the boy. "What do you want?" Minji's voice was steady, though her heart was racing. "I don't want anything," Giovanni replied. "But you have something I need. The boy, his family, they owe me something, and now so do you." Minji's throat tightened. "I'm not involved in anything you're doing, Giovanni. I'm just trying to help this child. I don't know anything about your business. Giovanni's laugh was low and smooth, sending a shiver down her spine. Oh, but you do. You're much more involved than you think. Your family. You've hidden the truth for a long time, haven't you? Minji's heart skipped a beat. She could feel the weight of his words sinking in. Her family? What did he know about her family? Her parents had left the Mafia world long before she was born. They had hidden their past, and for good reason. No one in her life knew the full extent of the family secrets. Yet here was Giovanni, dragging them to the surface. Look, I don't know what you're talking about, Minji said, trying to hold on to her composure. But if you're threatening me or this child, I'll go to the police. Giovanni didn't flinch. You think I'm afraid of the police? You're a smart woman, Minji, but your silence won't save you. I've already made my decision. You'll help me, or you'll find out how far I'm willing to go to get what I want. The line went dead. Minji stared at the phone in her hand, the screen dimming as her mind raced. She didn't have time to panic. She had to think. She had to protect the boy. She couldn't let Giovanni get to him, and she couldn't let him drag her into whatever game he was playing. She turned to the boy, who was still standing by the door, his small frame trembling. She couldn't keep him here, not with the looming threat of Giovanni's men finding her. She had to figure out what was going on, fast. Hey, Minji said softly, walking toward him. We need to stay safe. I'll make sure nothing bad happens to you. She gently guided the boy into the bedroom, sitting him on the bed. As she turned to gather her things, she heard the unmistakable sound of tires screeching outside. The car was back. Minji froze as the screech of tires echoed through her apartment building's parking lot. Her heart thudded in her chest. She rushed to the window and peered out, her breath catching in her throat. A black SUV was parked across the street, its engine idling. It wasn't just any vehicle. It was the same one Giovanni had arrived in earlier. Her pulse quickened. The realization hit her like a wave. Giovanni's men were already here. Turning back to the child, Minji's mind raced. She couldn't let them find him. Not now, not like this. She had to get him out of there before it was too late. Her apartment was too exposed. The walls felt like they were closing in, the air growing heavy. She grabbed the boy by the hand and whispered urgently, "Stay quiet. We need to leave now." The boy, still wide-eyed with fear, nodded, his face pale and strained. He didn't fully understand the danger, but Minji could see the instinct to follow her. He was depending on her, and she wouldn't let him down. Minji grabbed her coat, threw it over her shoulders, and pulled the child towards the back door, which led to a small alleyway behind the building. It wasn't ideal. It was dark and narrow, and it would take them through parts of the city that were far from safe, but it was their only chance. The streets outside were too visible. Giovanni's men would be searching for her. As she stepped out into the alley, Minji's heart pounded in her chest. The cold night air hit her face like a slap, but she barely felt it. The only thing that mattered was getting the boy to safety. She moved quickly, glancing over her shoulder every few steps to make sure they weren't being followed. "Where are we going?" the boy asked, his voice small and trembling. "We're going to find your mom," Minji said, though she wasn't sure she believed the words herself. She had no idea where his family was, but she knew she couldn't keep him with her for long, not with Giovanni so close. They reached the end of the alley and took a sharp turn onto a quieter street. Minji's mind raced as she tried to come up with a plan. She needed help. Someone who could protect the boy, someone who knew how to deal with dangerous people like Giovanni. She thought of her old friend, Detective Claire Parker. Claire had left the force a few years ago, but Minji knew she could still trust her. She had too. Minji pulled out her phone and dialed Claire's number, praying she pick up. The phone rang once, twice. Then on the third ring, Claire answered. "Minji, what's going on?" Claire's voice was calm, but there was an edge of concern beneath it. "I need your help," Minji said, her words coming out rushed. "There's a child, he's lost, and there are people after him. Mafia people, Giovanni Moretti." Claire's silence on the other end of the line made Minji's blood run cold. "Claire," Minji pressed, her grip on the phone tightening. "Please, you have to help me." "I know Giovanni," Claire said, her voice sharp. You need to get out of there, Minji. Now, do you have somewhere safe to go? Minji glanced around, her heart still pounding in her chest. I'm not sure. I'm in the city. I don't know who I can trust. Head to the old warehouse on Oak Street. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Don't stop, don't go anywhere else. Understand? Minji nodded, even though she knew Claire couldn't see her. I understand. I'll be there. Please hurry. She hung up the phone and turned to the boy, who was watching her with wide, nervous eyes. We're going to the warehouse. It's safe there. Do you think you can walk a little longer? The boy nodded, his grip on her hand tightening. He wasn't speaking much, but his body language said everything. He was scared, but he trusted her. Together, they began walking down the dimly lit street toward Oak Street. Minji kept her eyes peeled, her senses alert. She didn't dare look back, but every footstep felt like a countdown. The feeling that they were being watched never left her. The city felt more oppressive than ever. As they neared the end of the block, Minji heard the unmistakable sound of car tires turning onto the street behind them. Her heart leapt into her throat. They were being followed. Without thinking, Minji grabbed the boy's hand tighter and pulled him into an alleyway between two buildings. The shadows swallowed them whole, and for a moment, Minji allowed herself a deep breath. She wasn't sure if the car had seen them, but she didn't want to take any chances. They needed to keep moving. She kept walking briskly, keeping to the narrow spaces between buildings, trying to keep out of sight. The boy stumbled a bit, but Minji was there to steady him, guiding him along. When they finally reached Oak Street, Minji felt a glimmer of hope. The warehouse was just ahead, an old, abandoned building with dark windows and rusting metal doors. It was the kind of place that made most people avoid it, but to Minji, it was the safest option. She knocked 3 times on the side door, then waited. Her nerves were stretched tight, and she could hear her heartbeat in her ears. The seconds felt like hours. Then, finally, the door creaked open. Claire stood there, looking every bit the former detective she was, tough, confident, and ready for anything. She stepped aside, motioning for Minji and the boy to enter. Come in quickly, Claire said, her eyes scanning the street behind them. They're close, we don't have much time. Minji hurried inside, the door closing behind them with a heavy thud. The darkness of the warehouse swallowed them, but it was safe. For now. The warehouse was cold, its steel walls echoing with every step they took. Minji glanced over her shoulder at the boy, who was still clinging to her hand, his small body shivering from fear, or perhaps from the cold. He looked lost, like he didn't understand why they were running, but Minji couldn't waste time explaining. She had to focus on getting them through this. Claire was already moving around the space, checking the corners and watching the door. She didn't speak as she worked, but Minji could see the determination in her eyes. She was ready for whatever came next. Minji took a seat on an old crate, the boy beside her. Claire reappeared, carrying a thermos and a small first aid kit. I know you're scared, but you're safe here, she said to the boy. We're going to figure this out, but you need to trust us. The boy nodded, though he still seemed disconnected, his gaze distant. Minji had seen it before, the way children in distress retreated into themselves, their minds shutting out everything to protect them from the overwhelming world around them. It made her heart ache, but she had to focus. Do you think Giovanni is here? Minji asked Claire, her voice low. She knew Giovanni wouldn't give up easily. He was a dangerous man, and he had already shown that he was willing to go to great lengths to get what he wanted. I don't know, Claire replied, her tone guarded. But we're not going to take any chances. I have a friend in law enforcement. He'll help us track Giovanni's movements. But for now, we need to stay hidden. You and the boy are the priority. Minji nodded, but a new wave of worry washed over her. Giovanni wasn't just after the boy, he was after something bigger. Minji could feel it deep in her bones. He wouldn't let this go easily. You didn't tell me the whole story, Minji, Claire said, sitting down across from her. What's really going on? Why is Giovanni after the boy? And why did you sound so scared when you called me? Minji hesitated, her mind flashing back to the moment Giovanni had spoken to her on the phone. The way his voice had dripped with cold authority, as though she were nothing more than a pawn in his game. The way he had threatened her family, mentioned things that she had spent years trying to forget. Giovanni, he knows about my family, Minji said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. He knows we were once connected to the Mafia. My parents were involved in things they wanted to escape from. I grew up away from that world, but Giovanni, he's found a way back into it. He knows more about me than I ever thought possible. Claire's eyes narrowed. Your family? I didn't know you were tied to that world. Your parents left it behind a long time ago, right? Minji nodded, her throat tightening. They did, but Giovanni's family, they've been hunting for something that belongs to them. A fortune, something hidden by my parents when they left. And now Giovanni thinks the boy, he's the key. Claire's expression darkened. That's why Giovanni's interested in him. The boy must be tied to your family's past. Minji's mind raced, piecing things together. Giovanni's strange behavior, his obsession with the child, it all made sense now. The boy wasn't just a lost child. He was the key to the treasure Giovanni had been searching for, and Minji, by mere association, was dragged into the chaos. We can't just wait here, Claire, Minji said, standing up. Giovanni's men are looking for us. We need to move, find out what he's planning next. Claire stood too, shaking her head. No, not yet. If we go out there now, we'll be walking right into a trap. We need to figure out who Giovanni is working with and how far this goes. But we can't do anything unless we know exactly where he's moving. We need information. Minji sighed, frustrated. She could feel the weight of the boy's gaze on her, his silent plea for answers. She knew Claire was right. They couldn't rush into this. They had to be smart, strategic. But her protective instinct for the boy overpowered everything else. She couldn't sit around waiting for Giovanni to make his next move. She had to act. I don't care what Giovanni wants, Minji said, her voice steely with determination. I won't let him hurt him. We need to find the boy's family. We need to figure out where they are, and we need to get him back to them. Giovanni won't stop until he has what he wants. Claire stepped closer, her eyes softening. I get it, Minji, but we can't do this alone. We need backup. I'll call in some favors, get some intel on Giovanni. But right now, the best thing we can do is stay put and keep quiet. We'll figure it out, but we can't rush this. Trust me. Minji felt the tension in her shoulders begin to ease, just a little. Claire was right, they had to think this through. But the gnawing feeling of urgency in her gut wouldn't go away. Giovanni was out there, and the boy was in danger. Every second counted. As Minji sat back down, trying to calm herself, she looked at the boy again. His eyes were closed now, but his face was still etched with fear. She reached out and gently stroked his hair, trying to soothe him. We're going to get through this, she whispered. I promise, just hold on a little longer. The boy didn't respond, but Minji could feel his body relaxing slightly, his breathing growing steadier. She didn't know how long they would stay hidden in this warehouse, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to stop until Giovanni was stopped, and until the boy was safe. The hours dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. Minji sat in the dimly lit warehouse, her mind constantly racing. She couldn't stop thinking about Giovanni's words, his cold, calculated threats. The weight of it all pressed on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Every time she looked at the boy, she felt the crushing responsibility of keeping him safe. He was just a child, innocent and scared, and he didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire of her past. Claire moved around the warehouse, making calls and gathering information. Minji appreciated the quiet professionalism in Claire's movements, the way she handled everything with a calm demeanor, but Minji knew that they were running out of time. Every moment they spent here was a moment Giovanni could use to track them down. The boy's family, his true family, was somewhere out there, but Minji had no idea where to start looking. And with Giovanni's men likely scouring the city, every move had to be calculated. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Claire returned, her face tight with frustration. I've got some news, Claire said, her voice low. Giovanni's men have been on the move all night. They're looking for you, Minji, and the boy, they're not far. Minji's stomach dropped. How did they find us? Claire shook her head. They're good at what they do, but I've traced one of their vehicles. It's heading towards the docks. I think Giovanni, trying to make a move, he's trying to force you into a corner. Minji stood up, her body tense. We can't stay here. We need to move now. Claire paused, her eyes meeting Minji's. We don't have much time, but if we leave now, we might be walking right into a trap. I'm calling in some favors, but if you go now, we need to move fast and we need to stick together. Minji didn't hesitate. We're not waiting. The longer we stay here, the more danger we're in. We have to find the boy's family. We have to get him out of this mess. The determination in Minji's voice left no room for argument. Claire sighed, nodding reluctantly. All right, but we need a plan. We can't rush in without knowing where Giovanni is heading. Minji looked at the boy, who was still sitting quietly in the corner, his eyes wide, his hands clutching his knees. She knelt beside him, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. Hey, buddy, we're going to get you home. We'll find your family. You just have to stay close to me, okay? The boy nodded, his eyes full of trust but still clouded with fear. Minji gave him a reassuring smile before standing up and turning back to Claire. I'm ready, Minji said. Let's go. Claire reached into her bag and pulled out a small handheld radio. She spoke into it briefly and then turned to Minji. All right, we have one shot at this. I've contacted a few people who can get us to the docks without being seen, but we need to move fast. Giovanni's men are on their way. Minji nodded, her heart pounding. Let's do it. The three of them moved quickly through the back exit of the warehouse, emerging into the night. The cool air hit Minji's face, and she shivered despite herself. The city was eerily quiet, the usual noise of late-night traffic absent. They moved in silence, sticking to the shadows as they made their way toward the docks. Minji could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy. She had no idea what they would find at the docks, but she knew one thing: Giovanni would stop at nothing to get what he wanted, and she wasn't about to let him take the boy. As they reached the edge of the docks, Claire motioned for them to stop. She crouched low, scanning the area. I see two men on the far side, Claire whispered. They're watching the entrance. If we go around the back, we might be able to slip past them unnoticed. Minji's eyes darted toward the men Claire had pointed out. They were standing near a shipping container, their eyes scanning the area. Minji felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She knew they couldn't risk getting caught, but at the same time, she knew they had to move quickly if they were going to stay ahead of Giovanni's men. We don't have much time, Minji said softly. Let's go around the back. Claire nodded and led the way, moving swiftly but silently. Minji followed closely behind, the boy still holding her hand, his grip tight but reassuring. They moved through the shadows, staying low, until they reached the rear of the shipping container. Minji's heart was in her throat as she glanced over her shoulder. No sign of the men yet, but they had to keep moving. They rounded the corner of the container, and Minji saw something that made her freeze: another man. He was standing in front of a van, speaking into a walkie-talkie. Minji's pulse raced. They couldn't afford to get caught, but she couldn't back down now. Claire, Minji whispered, her voice barely audible. We need to move now. Claire nodded, pulling Minji into the shadows of another nearby container. She turned to the boy and gently whispered, Stay close, we're almost there. They crouched behind the container, waiting for the man to turn away. Minji could feel her heart beating in her ears as she watched the man. Every second felt like an eternity. Finally, the man turned, walking toward the shipping container, his back turned to them. Now was their chance. Claire took a deep breath and motioned for Minji to follow. They moved quickly, slipping past the man and toward the edge of the dock. The boy kept up with them, his small legs working hard to keep up with the adults. As they neared the end of the dock, Minji felt a surge of hope. They were so close to finding the boy's family, to getting him out of Giovanni's reach. But she couldn't shake the feeling that they were still being watched. Giovanni wouldn't give up so easily. Minji's legs burned as they reached the far end of the dock, the chill of the night air nipping at her skin. The boy, despite his exhaustion, stayed close, his small hand still gripping hers tightly. She couldn't afford to look back, not now. Giovanni's men were closing in, and they were running out of time. Claire led the way, her pace steady and sure, eyes scanning the area for any signs of movement. The darkened docks stretched out before them, filled with shadowed containers and empty spaces where anything could be hidden. Minji could feel the weight of the boy's fear, his silent presence a constant reminder of the danger they were all in. She kept moving, her every instinct telling her to get them as far from Giovanni's reach as possible. They reached a small, rusted door at the far end of the dock, just beside a large warehouse that seemed abandoned. Claire knocked 3 times, sharp and quick. Minji's heart raced as she heard the shuffle of footsteps inside. She held her breath, hoping they weren't too late. The door creaked open, revealing a short man with a scruffy beard and tired eyes. He looked them over quickly before motioning them inside. "Quick, get in," the man said in a low voice. "We don't have much time." Without hesitation, Minji followed Claire and the boy into the dimly lit warehouse. The air inside was thick with dust, and the only sound was the soft hum of distant machinery. The man locked the door behind them and turned to face them, his eyes wary but determined. "I'm Marcus," he said, his voice gravelly. "Claire called me. What's going on?" Claire stepped forward, her expression serious. "Giovanni's men are on the move. They're after Minji and this boy. We need to get them out of here before they track us down." Marcus nodded, looking at the boy with concern. "You're sure they're after him?" Minji glanced down at the boy, who had been silent ever since they started running. He was still holding on to her, but his grip had loosened slightly. She could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of everything that had happened. He had no idea what was going on, but she could feel his trust in her. "I don't know why they're after him, but Giovanni is obsessed," Minji said, her voice tight. "I think he believes the boy is the key to something from my family's past." Marcus raised an eyebrow, but Claire stepped in before Minji could elaborate further. "We need to move him now. Giovanni won't stop until he has him." Marcus nodded, his face hardening. "All right, I know a place we can go, but it's risky. We'll have to take a back route, avoid any main roads." Minji didn't hesitate. "Whatever it takes, let's go." Claire turned to Minji, her eyes soft with understanding. "We'll get you both out of this, Minji. I promise." They quickly gathered their things and moved out, staying close to the walls as they crept through the dark warehouse. Minji's mind raced. Giovanni was ruthless, and he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. Every corner they turned, every alley they passed, she felt as though they were being hunted. Her heart pounded in her chest, and every footstep felt like an eternity. As they reached the back door of the warehouse, Claire checked the street before opening it. The quiet of the night felt suffocating, the stillness too perfect. Minji had learned long ago that silence meant danger. Claire motioned for them to stay low, and they slipped out into the alleyway behind the building. The street was empty, but the air was thick with the weight of something waiting to happen. They kept moving, staying hidden in the shadows as they made their way toward the back streets. Minji couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every time they passed a corner or a streetlight, she expected to see the flash of headlights or hear the distant rumble of a car engine. Giovanni's men could be anywhere. She needed to stay calm. She had to keep the boy safe. "We're almost there," Claire whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "Just a few more blocks." Minji nodded, though her thoughts were far from reassuring. She didn't trust Giovanni's men to give up so easily. Every step they took felt like it could be their last. The closer they got to the exit, the more Minji realized just how dangerous this was. She had underestimated Giovanni, underestimated how deep his reach went. As they turned another corner, Claire suddenly stopped, her eyes widening. Minji followed her gaze to see a dark car parked a few feet ahead of them. The engine was running, the headlights illuminating the street. It was too close. They were too exposed. "Shit," Claire muttered under her breath. "They're here." Minji froze. The car was a clear sign that Giovanni's men had caught up. They had nowhere to hide, no way to escape. She could feel her pulse pounding in her ears, the fear rising like a tidal wave. "We can't go back," Minji whispered, looking around frantically. "We have to find another way." Claire's eyes darted to the alley on their right. "This way, quickly." Without a second thought, they veered into the narrow alley, the boy still holding tightly onto Minji's hand. The sound of footsteps behind them grew louder, and Minji's heart raced. They had to move faster. They had to get away. They sprinted down the alley, Claire leading the way, her hand gripping her gun. Minji's mind was a blur. All she could focus on was the boy's hand in hers and the pounding of her heart. Suddenly, Claire stopped and motioned for them to hide behind a stack of crates. Minji's chest tightened as they crouched down, the sound of their heavy breathing the only noise in the quiet alley. The footsteps grew closer. Minji could hear voices now, two men talking, their voices low but angry, Giovanni's men. "We know they went this way," one of the voices said. "They can't be far." Minji held her breath, her body tensed, her mind racing. They were so close. Too close. If they found them now, it was over. The footsteps grew louder, and Minji felt the panic rise in her chest. She wanted to run, to do something, anything, but she knew she had to stay still, stay quiet. The boy's hand in hers was the only thing keeping her grounded. She could feel his small, trembling fingers gripping hers, his body shaking with fear. Minji squeezed his hand gently, trying to reassure him without making a sound. "Stay quiet," Claire whispered, her voice barely audible. "Let them pass. We'll move when they're gone." Minji nodded, but every second felt like an eternity. The voices grew louder as the men came closer. Minji could hear their boots scraping the pavement, the sound of their breath heavy in the cold air. The tension in the alley was palpable, suffocating. If they found them now, there was no way out. Claire's hand was wrapped around the grip of her gun, her eyes scanning the alley with deadly focus. Minji could see the muscles in her neck tense, the determined set of her jaw. She was ready to fight, but Minji knew that was a last resort. They couldn't afford to make noise. They had to wait. The voices grew louder, closer. The men were almost upon them. Minji's heart hammered in her chest as the footsteps stopped just a few feet away. She could feel the heat of their presence, the oppressive feeling that came with being hunted. Then, just as quickly as they had come, the footsteps moved on. Minji let out a slow, shaky breath. She didn't dare move. They were so close now, if they had been discovered. "Keep low," Claire whispered urgently. "We move now." In a fluid motion, Claire stood up and darted into the next alley, motioning for Minji and the boy to follow. Minji moved as quickly as she could, pulling the boy along with her. Her heart was still racing, but there was no time to pause. They couldn't stop until they were far from Giovanni's reach. They ran through a series of alleyways, weaving in and out of narrow streets, staying hidden in the shadows as much as possible. Every time Minji glanced over her shoulder, she half expected to see the flash of headlights or hear the screeching of tires. But the streets remained eerily quiet. It was almost as though the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. After what felt like hours, they finally reached a small, dimly lit street. Claire stopped, scanning the area. "We're almost there," she said, her voice tight with exhaustion. "Just a few more blocks. Stay close." Minji nodded, but a cold, gnawing feeling still lingered in the pit of her stomach. She knew they were close, but she couldn't shake the sense of being watched. Giovanni wouldn't stop. He would keep coming, and she wasn't sure how long they could stay ahead of him. They continued moving, but as they reached the end of the street, Minji froze. A black car was parked ahead, its engine running. "No," Minji whispered, her heart sinking. "They're here." Claire stepped forward, motioning for them to stay down. The car's headlights flickered on, and a figure stepped out of the driver's side. Minji's stomach churned as the man turned, his face illuminated by the streetlight. It was one of Giovanni's men. They were trapped. "Get down," Claire hissed, her voice low. "We need to hide now." But it was too late. The man had already seen them. He was walking toward them, his steps quickening. Claire's hand moved to her side, her fingers brushing the gun. Minji could see the conflict in her eyes, whether to fight or run. There was no easy answer. They couldn't outrun Giovanni's men forever. "Stay here," Claire whispered to Minji. She turned to face the approaching man. "I'll handle this." Minji's heart raced. She couldn't let Claire face this alone. They had come so far together. They had to stick together. Before she could stop herself, Minji stepped forward, grabbing Claire's arm. "No, we're doing this together." Claire's eyes met hers, and for a moment, Minji saw something soft there, something that told her Claire understood. They were in this together, no matter what happened next. The man was closer now, his eyes narrowing as he recognized them. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice low, dangerous. Claire's hand moved to her side, pulling out the gun. But just as she raised it, a loud noise erupted from the street, tires screeching, a car speeding down the block. The man turned his head just in time to see the vehicle barreling toward him. It was another car, this one much larger, speeding toward them at full throttle. Before anyone could react, the car swerved, and the man was hit, thrown backward by the force of the impact. He collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Minji's eyes widened in shock. What the hell? A door slammed open, and a figure stepped out, the silhouette familiar. Giovanni Moretti. Minji's heart stopped. Giovanni, he was here. But Giovanni didn't look angry or enraged like she expected. Instead, he looked calm, almost relieved. "Minji," he said coolly, stepping toward her. "I told you not to make things difficult." Claire moved forward, her gun still drawn, but Giovanni didn't flinch. He raised a hand in surrender, his face unreadable. "I'm not here to fight," Giovanni said. "I just want the boy, that's all. Let's end this peacefully." Minji felt her breath catch in her throat. Giovanni's presence was suffocating, like a storm cloud about to burst. She could see his men getting out of the car, surrounding them. It was no longer just a conversation. This was a standoff. "No," Minji said, her voice firm, her body tense. "You won't get him." Giovanni's eyes flickered for a moment, and a dark smile spread across his face. "You really think you can stop me?" Before Minji could answer, Claire stepped forward, positioning herself between the boy and Giovanni's men. "You'll have to go through me first," she said, her voice cold and unyielding. Giovanni's smile faded. The game had changed. "If you like the story, leave a comment and tell me what you think about the kid."